Yeah, for yourself. Go to him alone. We are on that Samach Zion today, I believe, right? But I think we got out to Samach Zion Amud Aleph already. And the Gemara was elaborating on the discussion between Rabbi Elazar and Rabbi Yeshua. Rabbi Yeshua came up with this magic. I had a chance a little bit to catch up on the magic. I don't know if we have sound. I do not know if we have sound. This guy's not working. Test the sound. Just test. Actually, test their sound. Testing, testing. There we go. Dr. Gemara. So the Mishnah talked about the conversation where Rabbi Yeshua came up with a massive chiddush. The massive chiddush that he came up with was if you have an oila and you process it from the very first moment as a chatas, you make malika on only one sieve, and then you do the processing, you do the mitzvah hadam, you do zrikas hadam bilamata. So it morphs into a chatos and it becomes a kosher carbon, and therefore ein boy meila. That is what the Yeshua said. We were all scratching our heads yesterday. How does that work? How could a oila? There's a concept called spontaneous generation. That's spontaneous generation means. Spontaneous generation is they used to think that since you leave food out, maggots show up. It must be that somehow the food becomes maggots. That's called spontaneous generation. And they proved it wrong is because they left out two boxes with food and one had a screen on it. And the one with the screen didn't grow maggots. So it's right, the maggots comes minachutz. So this is like a spontaneous generation. It just changes from an oil to a chatas. So the first question that we all had is, who did the aveir? Like, you cannot have a chatas without an aveir. So the Mikdash David deals with this kasha, and the Mikdash David says a chiddush, a very big chiddush, but at least it helps us understand what's going on over here. You cannot be makdish a chatos unless there's an aveir that you did that it's halal. You cannot be makdish a chatos. But it doesn't mean an animal cannot morph into a chatos. The whole halacha is that you can't make a chatos if you didn't do it there. That's you can't be makdish a chatos. But something could morph into a chatos. Now you have the concept of one carbon morphing into another carbon, because we know the carbon Pesach, not bismanai, morphs to a shlomim. And the Gemara that discusses that we had earlier in the Masechta says, yes, it morphs. It's a morph into a bechor. The Gemara probes what it morphs into. And the Gemara, even at a havmin, that you morph into a chatos. There, Goofy could ask, I don't know there. The teretz is the whole issue of a chatos only being for someone who did an aveira, that's a chatos that someone is being makdish. But once something is kadosh, morphing into a chatas, that it could experience such a metamorphosis, even though there's no chet up here. Okay, so we started the Gemara, but we'll start back at the Gemara again, which extends the conversation between Rabbi Yeshua and Rabbi Elazar. Rabbi Elazar wanted to bring rayas that Me'ilah should still be relevant. Rabbi Yeshua held it wasn't. So Tanya, Amar Loi, Rabbi Elazar, Rabbi Yeshua. Asham sheshachtei b'tzafain l'shem shlomim yechiach. An asham that you shechted b'tzafain, so it was shechted where the asham is normally shechted, but you shechted it l'shem shlomim. Shlomim is something that there is no me'ilah. So asham is something that has me'ilah. Before the zrika sadam by the asham there's a me'ilah, and if you shechted l'shem shlomim, it's going to be a pasul of carbon. And therefore, also be a dimila. So Hashem sheshachta b'tzavin l'shem shalomim yechiach sheshina eshemoy. You were mashana its name because you had kavana for shalomim umay alabay, and you are moil. So too, ve'avata alta tama ala oila she'avapisha shina shema. Even though you changed it to chatos sheyimalava, there should be meila. Amal Rabbi Shua, so Rabbi Shua came back. That's not a kasha. Loyim amrid ba'asham. You know why by asham there's a din meila? Because shemshina es shemai. Yes, you changed its name from asham to shlamim. But Lashinas Mekaimai, you still shachted it b'tzafon, where the right place for the asham is to be shachted. Toimar ba'oila shashina eshema v'shina Mekaima. You did the shchita in a different place. You did the zrika in a different place. Amalar Belazar, that's not a kasha because I could talk about an asham sheshachted b'darim. I shachted an asham b'darim, so that's shinas Mekaima. L'shem shlamim shino shema yechiach shashina eshema. V'shines mekaymai, and it's my alamboy. Avata alta tama ala oila sha'af apisha shines shema v'shines mekayma. It should be my alamboy. Amalei Bishua, still not a kash. Loyim amid ba'asham sheshines shemai v'shines mekaymai, but v'lo shines ma'isov. You weren't mishana es ma'isov. What does it mean? You weren't mishana es ma'isov. So Rashi introduces a new thing. Shinui bailim. Kishini Maisa Chashavli. You weren't Mishana the Bailam. You're still a Bailam, you're just shechting it for a Shlomim instead of an Asham. Taima Ba'ila, Shashina Shema, Ves Maiseha. You also changed the way you do things. Veshina Es Makaima. Oh, I'm sorry. I jumped a little bit ahead of myself. So Amar al Bishul Laimar to Asham Shashina Shemai Vishinas Mekaima Veloishinas Maisav. So you weren't Mishana the Maisim because everything else still remains the same. Because everything else still remains the same. Tamar Ba'ila, where you completely changed everything. Shina Shema Ve'is Maisa Vishinas Mekaima. You changed its name, you changed the way you do things, and you changed the place in where you do things. You completely done everything not like the Oila. So here's where Rava comes back, and Rava says, Amar Rava, I don't understand what type of kasha is Rabbi Yeshua telling. Whatever rise Rabbi Yeshua bringing, Rabbi Lozer could easily have come back with a beautiful response. And for some reason, Rabbi Lozer stops here. Amar Rava, V'neimala, you know what Rabbi Lozer could have asked to Rabbi Yeshua? Asham, sheshachte b'darim, so you have Shina Mekaima, L'shem Shlamim, Shina Shema, B'Shini Bailim, and you had Kavana for a different Bailim. So Rashi, here's where Rashi says Shina Bailim is just like a Shina Maisa. Sheshina Shemai, B'Shines Mekaima, B'Shines Maisa. Now it's exactly parallel to the case of our Oila, that you totally transformed, and the halacha there would also be Moyal and Boy. But Rabbi Lazar, who had such a good comeback, and chose not to use that comeback, what does that teach us? Zogt Rava, you know what it teaches us? It teaches us something very important. Midaloika Amar Lei. Since Rabbi Lazar didn't respond with a phenomenal comeback that he could easily have brought to argue on Rabbi Yeshua, Shemami na Nachis Rabbi Eliezer L'Tamed Rabbi Yeshua. It's a raya that he finally understood the depth of what Rabbi Yeshua was saying, and he accepted it, and he was also moida to Rabbi Yeshua that the oil that was processed completely l'shem chatos becomes a chatos and becomes mutter for the kohen to eat, and therefore ein boy me'ila. The Amar of Adar bar Ahava, Rabbi Adar bar Ahava said an explanation to what Rabbi Yeshua's halach is. Omer Hayu Rabbi Yeshua used to say, Oilas ha'oiv, she'asa lamata, was just kamai sechatas, and he made it l'shem chatas. Kivan shemolak ba siman echad, the moment he does malika on one siman, nimsheches v'nasis chatas ha'oiv. The animal now transforms into a chatas ha'oiv. And therefore, there's no din me'ila. Frank the Gemara, if you're going to say that if you start doing one carbon and you process it like another carbon, so then why don't you say the opposite as well? Why don't you say why don't you say it transforms into an oila side? And if you're going to say that that's how Rav Adar Bar Ava understands Rabbi Yeshua that it works both ways, that's a problem. Because the Mishnah that quoted Rabbi Yeshua Shita only quoted it when the oila was made like a chatas. The Mishnah doesn't say that. Rabbi Yeshua says this halacha when the chatas was made like an oila. Our Mishnah is accurate. That Rabbi Yeshua only said as halacha by an oila that was processed like a chatas and not the other way around. My love, what does Rabbi Yochanan mean when he says kachi hatza v'suloi? There is no other case where Rabbi Yeshua holds that it morphs into a different carbon. So it's going to be shver. The way Rav Adar Bar Ava understood it, why wouldn't halacha be equally if the chatos was processed like an oila? No, loy. Maybe what it means, loy kachata shel kula mishnah. Maybe what it meant to say is the whole Mishnah has this type of exception. The example in the Mishnah given was when the oila was made like a chatos, but who adin it applies if the chatos was made like an oila. But Rav Ashi comes with a deeper insight to explain why dafke oila morphs into a chatos, but not the other way around. There, even the ha'ich sheir b'simen echad, the chatos is kosher with a malika of one siman. So by the time one siman was done by the oila sa'if, it's already good for a chatos. But for the oila, you didn't finish the malika yet because b'shnei simanim you require two simanim. The oila and therefore the oila sa'if lemata lesa. The oila sa'if does not exist at the bottom because normally the oila sa'if, the halach is we learned from the malach the hiktir that you have to do the malika on the top of the mizbeach, not at the bottom where it was on here. So he made a malika of one siman, which would not be a good malika for the oila, and he made it in the wrong place. So this now either it becomes a pasal oila, but instead of being a pasal oila, it could just transition and become a kosher. So given the malach ba siman echad nimsheches v'nases chatasoi. And Rashi explains very beautifully, if the carbon becomes disqualified but can't be anything else, later on it can't become something else. So here what we have is a scenario where you shechted the oila like the chatas. Now, after you shech the oila, if you hold shiva in timin l'simin is a problem. If you wait in timin l'simin, it's going to be possible. So you shechted one simin, you made a malika one simin, and now you're done. The moment you're done and you wait and you don't right away cut the next siman, instead of becoming a pasal oila, since it's already in the stage is set and the whole scenario is built that it could just become a chatos. If everything's there, it's in the right place at the right time, everything's perfect, so it'll just morph into a chatos. But by chatos ha'oif, if you shechted a chatos ha'oif l'mayla, that doesn't mean that it's out of place. There's a hakpada by the oila ha'oif to be shechted on top of the mizbeach. But we said by the chatas you can check it anywhere you want. So therefore, even though Amar Mar Malika b'chamokim ksheira mechimalak b'siman echad ivsala, once you made malika with one siman, it will be possible if you did it l'shem oila. Ki hadar malak b'idich siman, when he cannot transform instantly into an oila because it cannot transform into an oila till you sever the next siman. But the problem is there's a gap. The moment the first siman was severed, it's possible for a chatos because it was done l'shem oila, but it doesn't have anything else to transform into until you make malika on the second siman. That gets stuck, and therefore, if salah and ki hadar malak v'idich siman hechi mamshecha v'hava oilas oif, there was a gap in between where it was possible. So by the oil that you shechted like a chatos, it could just transfer right over without going through a period of psul. But by the chatas that you're making a malika like an oila, the problem is it becomes possible the moment you make malika on the first siman shalai l'shema, and it can't morph into an oila until you make malika on the second siman. So there's a gap where it doesn't have anything to morph into, and therefore the carbon remains possible. So therefore, there's a good reason to say that this only applies if an oila was shechted l'shem chados, but not the other way around. Let's quickly look at Rashi. Rabashi Yomer loyim loy polik. There's no argument here. But loy tiksha. And don't ask Akasha, why doesn't the same halacha apply by a chatos that was shechted like a learner? The Mishnah Oilos Haof. She'osa lamata. Kiva the chatos hechsheira b'simin echad. The chatos, the moment you make malik on one siman, it's already kosher to be a chatos. Ugemar avoidasa mimaher lahashlim hoidim sheyachal alzu shem oila psula. The gemar malach of chatos will be completed even before this animal, this carbon, can get a label of an oila psula. Because vizu hi achsher b'shnei simonim. Because the oila doesn't get its shem oila until it has both simonim separate. And that's why it won't passel when only one siman was severed, mishum asiyas mata, because it was also done at the bottom, meaning it was the malika was done at a place where the malika is not supposed to be done. There's a lot of gears changes in this Rashi from the Shina Mukabetzes, but I'm trying to just get through the Rashi without learning them, so that's not a little choppy. And we know you're not allowed to make malika on the oilus oif and anywhere besides the top of the mizbeach, and therefore clearly we're not doing anything right towards the oila, but before the oila could become an oila psula, it could become a chatas. Because you need the shehiyah, you have to stop the action. And you didn't. So it still is a kosher oil for a moment. At that moment, before it becomes puzzle, so as long as it can transfer from one carbon to the next without going through a period of psul, it will work. But a chata she'asa l'mayla k'ma'is oila b'shnei simonim u'l'shem oila. Well, even the malika b'chol mokem b'mizbeach share for a chatos mishum malikas ma'ila ein kan shinu lafkia mibenu shem chatos. The fact that the malika was done in the wrong place does not take it away from the shem chatos, because it's consistent with the mokem where a chatos could be shechted, and therefore ein kan shinu Hashem. So therefore, it will not transfer. V'chim the chatos gemar avoidasa simen echad, since the chatos you finished its avodas malika after merely the severance of one simin, mikoidim sheyigma ma'asoila, before it could transform into being an oila. So therefore, chalala shem chatos shenimla kalkula b'shaloi l'shma. Now it's a chatos psula before it could become an oila, and therefore v'nivstala b'shem shaloi l'shma, the whole carbon becomes possible because it's a chatos sheshachtai l'shem oila. And then v'chihader malak idich simin lavia l'chlal ma'asoila. It's too late already. It became possible in between. It hit a dead zone. Literally and figuratively. How will it transform into another? So at the end of the day, we have over here a slam dunk where Yeshua Shita of a chatos being able to transform into oila as a no, but the oila could transform into a chatos. Rabbi Eliezer did not have the response for the fact that Rabbi Eliezer stopped responding to Rabbi Yeshua and stopped defending his position. It's a raya that he got on side with Rabbi Yeshua, and he also agrees that the oila will morph into a chatas. Gufa zaklamar. Amar Rabbi Adabarav. Amar Rabbi Adabarav. Omer Hoya. Rabbi Yeshua used to say, oila soif she'asa lamata k'maisa chatos l'shem chatos. So it was l'shem chatos. It was k'maisa chatos because it was shachted lamata in a place where it would be possible for the oila, and you did the one siman. So therefore, kivin shemalach b'siman echad nimsheches v'nases chatos oil. Becomes a chatas. Zok Eilig Gemara. Tashma. So let's see if we can bring a raya that it will work both ways. Chatos lezu v'oila lezu. So this gets into a little bit of a complicated scenario, and it gets into Maseches Kinim, but we'll get through this. Chatos lezu v'oila lezu. So Rashi tells us we're taking a tour of Maseches Kinim, and we're taking the highlights of some of the most difficult Mishnayos there. Mishnah hi b'Maseches Kinim u'l'kamon amrinon stam Kinin Rabbi Shui. So the strategy now of the Gemara is we're going to try to prove from a Mishnah Maseches Kinim that an oila cannot become a chatas. Rabbi Shua's whole shita is the oila morphs into a chatas. We're going to show you from a Mishnah in Kinim that an oila does not transform into a chatas. And since we're going to find a random Mishnah that says that Rabbi Yeshua is commenting on. So it proves that the Mishnais and Kinim, who's its author? Their author is Rabbi Yeshua. So therefore, if I can prove that there's a Mishnah in Kinim that says an oil doesn't transform into a chatos, and I can prove that the time of those Mishnais is Rabbi Yeshua, so then I have a raya that Rabbi Yeshua holds that the oil does not morph into a chatos, and then we're going to have a kasha in our city. So the Mishnah says in Kinim, chatos l'zu. So here is the situation. Rachel shahoisa shricha chatos l'ledasa ve'ilasa kfar karba. A woman who gives birth, if she's poor and she can't bring a behemoth as a carbon, she has to bring an oila on a chatos. So she brings a set of birds, and one is brought as an oila, and the one is brought of a chatos. Now her oila was already brought, so she's already fulfilled her obligation to bring an oila, but she still needs to fill their obligation to bring a chatos. Leah, her friend, on the other hand, had the opposite scenario. Haisa tzricha oila. She already bought a carbon chatos, but she didn't bring a carbon oila. So Leah and Rachel said, let's get together. We'll buy the birds in pairs. Maybe that's how they were sold. We'll buy a pair of birds, and you need the oila, so you'll get one bird for your oila. I need a chatos, I'll get one bird for my chatos. So they bought a set of birds in partnership. The kavoi preda achas lachatos. They designated this bird is going to be the chatos, and not tamachatos lachatos Rachel. This preda is going to be it's Rachel's carbon, and it's for the carbon chatos. Preda achas, and this other bird is going to be the oila for Leah. And then with Nasnum Lakayin, they gave these two birds to the Kayin, and the Kayin got mixed up. So what should the Kayin have done? The one that was a chatos, he was supposed to make malika on milamata. Sever one sibin do das zrikas da milamata l'shem Rachel, and the oila he was supposed to bring l'shem Leah, and he should have made the malika on the top of his back. But the Kohen didn't do that. Also, stein lamaila. If he brought them both above, that means the oila would be kshera, but the chatos would be psula. So mechza kosher umechza pasuk. Now the problem is we don't even know. We don't. Well, he did both. No, he did both. So we know for sure whoever needed the oila got it, which was Leah, and whoever needed the chatos didn't get it, which was Rachel. So all that has to happen is Rachel has to bring another. And what about Shtem Lamata? What if he was marking both korbanos like a chatos? So again, mechza kosher, mechza pasul. One carbon is kosher, one is pasul, and therefore Leah, who needed the oila, will not have to bring another carbon because her animal didn't work out. Echas lamayla v'achas lamata. What if the Kohen was marking one bird like a chatas and one like a oila, but he didn't know which is which? He got mixed up. So now they could both have been brought in the wrong place. Shtei and psulos. Why? Shani Omer, we need to be concerned that chatas karva lamayla. Maybe the chatas was presented at the top of his back, the oila karva lamata, and maybe the oila was on the bottom. So they both might be off. So here's what the Gemara asks. So why would it be possible if the oila was karva lamata? Why will the oila be possible? Nihi nami the oila karva lamata. Even though the oila was karva lamata, didn't we just say in Rabbi Yeshua? Didn't Rabbi Abba just say in Rabbi Yeshua that the oila karva lamata will be kosher? Nihi nami the oila karva lamata timshaych v'tahava chatasoid. Let it be a chatasoid. So at least let the lady who needed the chatos, at least let's leg it by. Because mimonishach, both birds would have to do the chatos. And that is the kasha. So we still don't know that this brisa, it's author Rabbi Yeshua, but if it's true that an oila can morph into a chatos, why wouldn't an oila morph into a chatos over here? So let's see Rashi. Timoshech v'seitze yidei chevasa mimonavshech. Mimonavshech, the person who is bringing the chatos should be yaitza. Because im chatasa karva lamata, if it was her bird originally that was brought at the lower half of the zevach like a proper chatos, haritayv, then she's good. But even if her bird was supposed to be lamaila, but her friend's bird is supposed to be lamata, and that could be her chatos. Her friends can't use the oil anymore because her friend's carbon, which was supposed to be processed on top of the ended up being processed like a chatos. But according to Rabbi Shua, vinas is chatos. The chaverta in its richla. Why could she use the chatos? Because her chaverta is not using the chatos anyway. Because because the chaverta needed an oil, so she doesn't need it anyway. So we'll let it transform into a chatos and let it work for Leah. Perfect, according to Rabbi Shua. Zog to Gemara, that's not a kash. Eimer dam Rabbi Shua v'chad gavra. If the carbon is staying to represent one person, it's just morphing from an oila to a chatos, that's doable. But betray gavri, to go from Rachel's oila to Leah's chatos, that doesn't work. As Rashi says, Heich karbon shalzu yala lazu shein lachelik boy. How could Rachel's carbon work for Leah? How could Leah's carbon work for Rachel? And therefore, it's not a kasha. Zok Gemara, okay, but we're going to be relentless. We have another kasha, and each consecutive case here is going to multiply in its complexity. So the first case was a pretty simple case. One was an oil, one was a chatos, and the kohen doesn't know where he was marked to the oil and where he was marked to the chatos. Here it gets more complex. Tashma chatas v'oila usasuma umfureshes. What happened is there were 6 birds involved. Why were there 6 birds involved? So Rashi explains to us the case. Shtei noshim shalakhu gimel kinim be'erev. There are 2 women, and they bought 6 birds, and they were going to share these 6 birds. What did they? So each one obviously needed 3 birds. Why did each woman require 3 birds? Zu tricha oila. One woman needed an oila. For instance, maybe she was a yoledes, and she already brought her chatos, and now she just needs her oila, like in the earlier case. But the kancholim, she also had some other reason why she had to bring an oila and a chatos. Maybe she was a mitzoras. Maybe she had some other condition that was mechayev her an oila and a chatos. So she needs 2 oilas and 1 chatos. And the other one, so she's the kancholim echad chatos vechad oila. She needs 2 oilas and a chatos. The other woman needed the opposite. She needed shtei chatos v'oila, because from her yoledes she only brought the oila, not the chatos, and she needs another set. So, and therefore they decided to get together. Now they have 3 sets of birds, and the way they configured it it creates a tremendous complexity. They should have let their husbands take care of it, but since they didn't, it got very confusing. So upirshu echad min akinim, 1 set of birds, they spoke out, Preda oila lazu upreda chatas lazu. So that's just like the previous case. This set of birds, this bird is specifically an oila, and it's going to be for Rachel, and this bird is specifically a chatas, and it's going to be for Leah. That was the first set of birds. The second set of birds, the echad min akinim henichu stama. The second set of birds they didn't talk about. We were bringing them a shutvis, they didn't designate anything. Not what type of carbon it was, and not whose carbon it was. The agimel, pirshu, which one is a chatas and which one is an oila, but not designated to a specific person. Pray to zu oila, upray to zu chatas. Avol shemas bailim, loy nisparsh. So here's a pretty complicated case. There are 6 birds. 1 set of birds, it's designated. This is Rachel's oila. This is Leah's chatas. The second set of birds, nothing was discussed. And when that happens, whatever the kohen decides to designate it at, when he makes the malika, that's what takes hold. And the third set of birds, they designated which is a chatas, which is an oila, but not to whom. And now, what happened so now, what do you have here? One of them is a chatas, one of them is an oila. So you have 1 set that's chatas lazu specified who belongs to. You have a kantasuma where nothing was specified. The kan mefureshes. That's our 6 birds. So what are you supposed to do? Tzarich lahakriv beis akinim halalu stam al shtein oilois lemayla v'chatois lemata. What you're supposed to do is the oilois should be brought lemayla and the chatois should be lemata. the one that was stam and the one that was mufareshus, the one that there's nothing said about it, and the one where there's a designation, this is a chatas and this is an oila. So in those two cases, so you need to take two birds, one that's the chatas and one that is stam set, and do it lamata. And the one that's designated as an oila, and the other one that's tam, you make labaila, so it should be an oila. The third set, you got to be very specific. What's supposed to happen is the chatas azu and oila azu. There, the kohen has to know that this chatas, when he shechs this chatas, he needs to make sure that he has kavana for rachel, and when he shechs this oila, he needs to know that he has kavana for leah. And then v'nastam l'kohen, and they gave him to the kohen, and the kohen completely mixed up their order. Also, that's literally like you go to a fast food place and you order burger with fries, and they give you fish with salads, right? Totally mixed up the order. So also kulon l'mayla. What if the kohen was a makrib all these birds l'mayla, like an oila? So right off the bat, your 3 chatois are going to be possible. So therefore, mechza kosher, mechza pasal. All of the people who needed oilos, their chiyuvim were discharged, and everyone who needed a chatos, they have to bring it again. Tatzi Rashi. Also, kulon l'mayla kisavar kulon oilos, because the kohen thought that they were all carbon oilos. The law is mechza kosher, mechza pasal. Very simple. Kol chatois psulois. All the chatois are psulois because they were all hukrav l'mayla. Utzrichais lahavi kol chatois alein. So Rachel needed to bring 2 chatois, has to bring 2 chatois, and Leah who owed 1 chatos has to bring 1 chatos. Now, what happens if it's kulon lamata? The kohen was makrib all of them like a chatos, so then whoever needed a chatos, their chiv is discharged, but whoever needed an oila, they'll have to bring it. So again, mechza kosher, mechza pasal, which Rashi explains, kulon lamata kesavar kulon chatois, mechza kosher, mechza pasal means kol oilos are psulois, and therefore utzrichos lahavi kol oilos shelein. Rachel would have to bring 1 oila, and Leah would need to bring 2 oilas. But where it gets really complicated is if it's chatchen l'mayla v'chatchen l'mata. The kohen was makrif 3 of these birds l'mayla, 3 l'mata. We have no idea which ones. So now they can all be possible. So the halach is Einak Shera, the only set that will be kosher is Ella Sesuma. So we know in each set, one was Lamaila, one was Lamal. V'zoivait, we know that in each set, one was Lamaila, one was Lamata. So therefore, if that would happen, then the only one that's kosher would be the Sesuma. Why? Because the one where it was designated, this was Leah's Chatas and this is Rachel's Oila, that's possible because they might have been flipped around. The one where it didn't designate who the carbon belonged to, but one was designated as a chatas and one was designated as noila. Again, it got switched around. They're both possible. But the sesuma, neither carbon was designated as to what it was. When the kohen made the malika, that's when it got designated. And of course, whatever he designated it at would be chal. One would be an oila, one would be a chatas. So therefore, 1 oila and 1 chatas would be valid. And now they have to clean up the rest of their schaivisin, therefore umischalekas beinayim. So they have to figure out now how much they owe. So zokt Rashi, the mischalekas beinin hoil be'eir v'lochum, since they bought it all together. Va'achas yoitzes ba yidei chatos. One of them was yoitze the chatos. Va'achas yoitzes ba yidei oila, and the other one was yoitze the oila. So, but they don't know. Each one was Yotze one, but they didn't even know which one. Whichever one their Yotze works for them, because they both need to bring at least 1 chatos, and they both need to bring at least 1 oila. So each one discharged one of their chiyuvim, but they don't know which one, right? So what do? The yikchu kan echad oid beinein. They have to buy 1 more set of birds b'shutvis, and the one that they're makar b'shutvis v'yakrivu b'tnai, they should be makar with a tnai. Im oila rishona went to Rachel, and the chatas was Leah's. So in this one, it should be the opposite. So once you do that, now each woman brought 2 oilas and 2 chatos, right? Now the problem is, since each woman brought 2 oilas and 2 chatos, one woman needs to bring an extra oila, and the other one needs to bring an extra chatos, right? So that's what will happen. And then each woman will have to bring, the one who needed the extra oil will bring the extra oil, and the one who needed the extra chatos will bring the extra chatos. So Zog to Gemara. That's right. This is not a good partnership. Zog to Gemara. The ilu mufurashim, the mufurashim, the one where they said this was an oil, this was a chatos, that won't work. Why won't it work? No one was designated to a specific woman. It was just designated as one chatas, one is an oil. So let's say you were makar of them both lamata. Let's say the oila was brought lamata, right? Why would the oila be possible, even if the oila was brought lamata? The same kasha we have from Yeshua. That wouldn't work. No one could be yotze with it. But v'mai nihinami the oila parva lamata, even though it's possible that the set in which we knew the karbanis were designated one bird's a chadas, one bird's an oila, even if the oila was brought lamata, because we don't know which was brought where, it should still be kosher. Tim shoich v'sahave chatas ha'oif. Let it become a chatas ha'oif. And there you don't have a problem that it's for two people, because she's in the group over here. V'chitema ha deloy Rabbi Yeshua. And if you're going to want to tell me that, yeah, you have a raya from a Mishnah and Kinim, in fact, that you don't say that the oil morphs into a chatas. Yeah, you have a raya, but that's not Rabbi Yeshua. We're talking about Rabbi Yeshua over here. You can't say that. You cannot argue that the Mishnah and Kinim is not going according to Rabbi Yeshua, because I'll prove to you it's going according to Rabbi Yeshua, and the proof is going to be, before we learn this last case, which is particularly complicated, the proof is going to be, because at the end of this very complicated Mishnah, and I'm going to sneak on to Amar Aleph, the Mishnah says, Amar Rabbi Yeshua, so I'm skipping the 5 lines down on Samach Ches Amar Aleph, Amar Rabbi Yeshua, Zehu, this complicated case, and these Mishnayos, Sha'amru Kishehu Chai Koiloi Echad, when an ayil is alive, it has one voice, Uchshumeis Koiloi Zayin. We'll get into what that means later. But what's relevant to us is we have arrived from a Mishnah in Kinim that the oil does not morph into a chatos, and we know that it's Rabbi Yeshua talking. So Ibazah, you have a raya against Rav Ada bar Ava, who learns in Rabbi Yeshua that a oil morphs into a chatos. So the Gemara, Eimer Damar Rabbi Yeshua, that's lafuki midei meila. Rabbi Yeshua said the oil morphs into a chatos to the extent that it's a kosher carbon and the kohanim can eat it, and there's no meila. But it doesn't mean it's oil l'bayla moshe chayva. He never said that I can morph an oil into a chatas and it'll pater my responsibility to bring a chatas. That he never said. So mamela, you don't have a kasha from that Rabbi Yeshua. Okay, now let's go through the final case of this Mishnah and Kinim, which gets to be another level of complexity. So let's have a look. Umi matis amrit hachi tashma ha'isha. Those take out the word tashma. But ha'isha sha'amar. A woman said the following halach. Ha'le'areh la'kein im eled zachar. She said, if I give birth to a boy, the Torah mandates that I got to bring 2 birds, one a chatas, one an oil. But I want to make a neder that if I give birth to a boy, I'm going to bring a second set of birds, a chatas and oil. So now yolda zachar. So now she owes 2 chatois and 2 oilos. She owes a chatas and an oil. That's mandatory for her chiyuv of yoledes, and she owes an oilos oif and a chatas oif as her own gift. Now, I apologize. She owes 2 oilos. She can't donate a chatas oif, right? So she said, I will bring 2 birds, 2 oilos nedava if I give birth to a son. So she gave birth to a son. Now she owes a chatas of chiyuv because she's a yeledes, a oila of chiyuv because she's a yeledes, and 2 birds oilos nedavos. That's what she owes now. So what happened was mavia shtei kinim. She brings 2 sets of birds. Achas l'nidra, which would both be oilos, the achas l'chayvasa, and 1 for her chiyuv. Now, if everything would have went properly, the kohen would have taken the 2 oilos of neder and the 1 oila of chiyuv and been makavit on the top half of the mizbeach, making a malika on both simonim, and the bird that was supposed to be the chatas of chiyuv, the kohen, had he done it properly, would have been makrivit lamata. But that's not what happened. Nosnon lekohen. She gave it to the kohen. What's supposed to happen is hakohen tzarech la'asoshin shalosh lamayla v'achas lamata. That would have been in a perfect world. But lo yasakein. That's not what happened. Ella, what he did was also shtayim lamayla ushtayim lamata. V'loy nimlach, and he didn't ask her what is what. So now we have a very big mess on our hands. He didn't ask her details of what's what. So he just brought it blindly, shtayim l'mayla and shtayim l'mata. So now we have to go through the follow. So let's have a look. If she brought shtayim l'mayla and shtayim l'mata, so it's possible that of the shtayim l'mayla, one of them was a chatos, right? So she only for sure discharged one oil, right? Her chatos, she might have discharged, she might not have discharged. It all depends on if that chatos was brought at the bottom. And all the others were not discharged. So how does she deal with fulfilling her responsibilities? Tzricha shetavi oid preda achas. She has to bring one individual bird, v'sakrivena l'mayla, min echad. So now it gets even more complicated because she could have complicated this further. We're talking up until now where she just said, I'm going to bring 2 oilus nadava. What if she said, I'm not going to bring 2 oilus nadava. Whatever type of birds are brought for my oilus of chiyuv, it's going to be those same type of birds for my oilus nadava. So now that complicates it further. So because she said, if she said it to be the same type of birds, so if for the chiyuv she brought tayrim, then she has to bring for a nedava tayrim. And if for her chiyuv she brought b'nei yoina, then for her nedava she also have to have b'nei yoina. So if it's min echad, if all of the birds were from the same min, so there's no concern that the dove is not good at all, because for sure they're all brought from the same min. So all she'll have to do now is she will have to bring one preda v'sakrivena l'mayla. If it was from one min, she just needs to bring one more bird and be makrivit on top. Why? Zokt Rashi. Tzarech shetavi oit preda achas v'takrivena l'mayla if it was min echad, and if it was shtei minim, she needs to bring 2 birds. Why? Let's see the follow-up. Playmer. Ima rishayna min echad hayu shnei akidim tayrin or shnei b'nei yoina. If the first set of birds that she brought were all the same type of birds, then all she needs to do is tavi oid preda achas me'oisa min. All she has to do is bring one more, either tar or yoina, depending on what the birds that she brought were. La'oila the yotzi de'akoil. So be yotzi everything. Why? Shemikan shehikriv hakoyin rishon, from the first set that the koyin was makriv, yotasa yidei leidasa. Sharei l'shem choy ve'ikara. For sure she'll be yotze her bonus of leida. Okay? So the koyin was makriv, one on top, one on the bottom. We say it was l'shem choy ve'ikara. So right away, we say if he's bringing 2 sets of birds, one's chiyuv, one's nedava, for sure the first set was for the chiyuv, and being that she didn't designate which bird was a chatas and which was an oila, when the kohen was makriv that first set of birds, he will be makriv whatever he designated as the oila that he shechted above will work, and whatever he designated as the chatas and he shechted below, it will work. So her chayv is taken care of. Vasheni, the second pair, Nishal and Nidra, and they both, you have to be makriv on the top of the mizbeach, but he did one above and one below. So therefore, all she really lost is only one bird. V'nifsal goizel echad mehen basiyas mata. She only lost one bird that was supposed to be brought as an oila l'mayla, and instead it was brought lamata. So therefore, she just needs to replace one bird. V'reizeh yiyah tachto. Now the additional bird that she'll buy will take care of the one bird that they were makriv lamata that should have been brought lamayla. So does that make sense? So the first set of birds. Yeah. No, so the way it works is, since she didn't designate it in advance, which was a chatas, which was an oila, she just brought the birds, then the kohen's machshava is what determines it. So whatever he does will work. So that's if it was the same type, if everything's the same type. But Vimari Shaina, Mishnei Minin Hayu, what if she brought one set of Tayrim and one set of Bnei Yoina? So now the Nidava was never fulfilled because the wrong type of bird. So V'Mishnei Minin Hayu, Kan Tayrim and Kan Bnei Yoina, well then Tavi Shtayim she'll have to bring two birds, a tar and a bnei yoina, because she doesn't know if she needs to add a tar or a bnei yoina. The Yaakov Shnein Lamaila, they'll both be brought as a carbon oila. Mishum de Besavkalon, we don't know which set of birds that the kohen was makra first was the tar and which one was the bnei yoina. Mishum de Besavkalon, Eizakan Mishnayim Arishonim Karav Achrain. Which one was the second set of birds that the kohen was makriv, and we know the second set of birds that he was makriv is the one to fulfill her nether, Bavel Nidra. And then v'niv sami menu goyz alechot. One of that pair was possible, and the halach is v'tricha la'ashlimay me'oisay yamin. If she had two carbonates that were two toirim, and one of them becomes possible, the replacement carbon can't be a ben yoin. The replacement carbon has to be the same type of animal that she had the chetchila. You can't bring a tar to replace a ben yoina, v'loy ben yoina keneged. So therefore, since we don't know which set was brought as her nether, so it's possible that that when she's buying now an extra bird, she's not buying the right type of bird. So to be safe, if she buys one tar and one yaina, regardless if the original nadava was brought with tayrim, so she made it up, and if the original nadava was b'nei yaina, she made it up. Okay, so we finished this level of complication. Now we're going to go to a further level of complication. Oh, it's 6:51. We better stop here because we're running late. We'll have to continue this last case. But as far as the Shakal Kai of the Gemara is, again, this exact case and its complications is not directly related to the Pshat of our Gemara. We've already made a point. We proved to our Gemara that Rabbi Yeshua is the Tana of Kinim. We also proved that in the case of the birds, the oila wouldn't morph into a chatos, and the Gemara said that's true. Of course, it doesn't morph into a chatos, and that if you owed a chatos, it would be makro for you chatos. If you owed an oila, it would work for your oila. That's not what he's saying. He's just saying that the carbon is not possible. So therefore, it's not a kasha from Kinim. So tomorrow we're going to learn this last case, which is very complicated, but once you get through it, it's pretty simple. Everyone should have an awesome day.